Ladies and gentlemen, imagine an aircraft that looked like it had skipped several steps of evolution and jumped straight from a scientist's notebook into the sky. No propeller spinning politely in front, no long elegant fuselage with a tail like a traditional fighter. Just a compact, tailless machine with a rocket engine that could launch it toward the stratosphere faster than almost anything else flying during World War II. That extraordinary machine was the Messerschmitt Me-163 Komet, the only rocket-powered interceptor ever to see operational combat. Before we dive in, a quick friendly reminder. If you enjoy stories about strange aircraft, brilliant engineers, and machines that sometimes behaved like slightly angry science experiments, consider subscribing to the channel. Our supporters keep these stories flying, and trust me, this one is worth the ride. To the late 1930s, when aviation engineers in Germany were exploring radical ideas about propulsion and speed. The origins of the Me-163 trace back to the late 1930s, when German aviation planners became fascinated by the possibility of rocket propulsion. Traditional piston engines had limits, but rockets promised something extraordinary, blistering climb rates and speeds that seemed almost impossible at the time. The Reich Air Ministry supported rocket engine designer Helmuth Walter, who began developing experimental rocket motors fueled by volatile, the chemical mixtures. At the same time, aerodynamicist Dr. Alexander Lippisch, working at the German Research Institute for Gliding Flight, was experimenting with tailless aircraft designs. Lippisch believed that removing the tail could reduce drag and improve efficiency at high speed. The two concepts, rocket propulsion and tailless aerodynamics, soon merged into one highly secret project. Early experimental aircraft such as the DFS-194 proved that the concept could work. When Lippisch and his team moved to the Messerschmitt factory in Augsburg in 1939, development accelerated dramatically. The resulting aircraft became the Messerschmitt Me-163, a revolutionary interceptor designed to climb rapidly and attack Allied bomber formations. Early prototypes flew in 1941, and the aircraft stunned observers by setting a world speed record of 1,004.5 kilometers per h-hour, or about 623.8 miles per h-hour. At the time, that speed seemed almost unbelievable. Production versions, especially the Me-163B, began appearing in 1943. Around 370 aircraft were eventually built. Operational units such as Jagdgeschwader 400 were formed to deploy the new interceptor against Allied bombers attacking German industry. Yet the Komet's operational career proved complicated. The aircraft's incredible performance came with severe limitations, including extremely short endurance and dangerous fuel systems. By the time Me-163 units began intercepting Allied bombers in 1944, the war situation had already turned against Germany. In combat, the aircraft achieved only 9 confirmed kills, despite its remarkable speed and climb performance. Nevertheless, even its limited operational history demonstrated that the Komet represented a technological leap forward. Technically speaking, the Me-163 was unlike any other fighter of its time. Instead of a conventional piston engine or jet turbine, it used the Walter 109-509, a liquid-fuel rocket engine capable of producing approximately 1,500 kilograms of thrust, roughly 3,300 pounds. This engine used an extremely volatile fuel combination consisting of T-Stoff, a concentrated hydrogen peroxide solution, and C-Stoff, a mixture containing hydrazine hydrate, methanol, and water. When the engine ignited, the aircraft could climb with astonishing speed. The Komet could reach its operational ceiling of about 39,690 feet, 12,100 meters, in under 3.5 minutes, an almost unimaginable climb rate for the 1940s. The aircraft itself was small and compact. The wingspan measured approximately 30 feet 10 inches, or about 4 meters, while the length was roughly 19 feet 2 inches, about 5.8 meters. The empty weight stood near 4,200 pounds, or around 1,900 kilograms, depending on configuration. Unlike conventional fighters, the Me-1963 had no normal landing gear. During takeoff, it used a detachable wheeled trolley. Once airborne, the pilot released the trolley, and the aircraft landed later using a retractable skid beneath the fuselage. This unusual arrangement reduced weight and drag, but also made landings notoriously difficult. Armament consisted of two Mk-108 30mm cannons, powerful enough to destroy a heavy bomber with only a few hits. However, hitting a bomber proved easier in theory than in practice. The Komet approached its targets at such extreme speed that pilots had only seconds to aim and fire. Fuel consumption was perhaps the Komet's greatest limitation. The rocket engine burned through its propellants quickly, giving the aircraft only about 8 minutes of powered flight. After that, the pilot had to glide back to base like a high-speed glider. That gliding phase could be surprisingly tense. Landing a rocket fighter with no power and a skid for landing gear required extraordinary skill and nerves of steel. Sometimes I imagine my friend Timmy trying to land one. Timmy once attempted to fix his lawn chair with duct tape and optimism, so giving him a rocket interceptor would probably end with a spectacular story and 3 separate apologies to the airfield commander. Still, despite its flaws and dangers, the Me-163 demonstrated just how far engineers were willing to push technology during wartime. It was not merely a fighter aircraft. It was a glimpse into the future of high-speed flight. The philosophy behind the Messerschmitt Me-163 was simple in theory, but radical in practice. Climb faster than anything else in the sky, strike bombers before they reached their targets, and return before the enemy even understood what had happened. Instead of designing a conventional fighter meant to patrol or escort, engineers created a specialized interceptor whose entire purpose was speed and vertical performance. The Komet's swept wings and compact fuselage reduced drag and improved stability at high speed. Without a horizontal tailplane, the aircraft had a distinctive triangular silhouette that looked futuristic even by modern standards. The aircraft's structure mixed metal and wood construction. Some wing sections used wood because wartime shortages made aluminum difficult to obtain. Even so, the airframe remained remarkably strong for such a compact machine. Rocket propulsion shaped every aspect of the aircraft's design. Because the rocket motor consumed fuel at an astonishing rate, the Komet was never intended to remain airborne for long. Instead, the pilot would take off using the detachable wheeled trolley, ignite the engine, and climb almost vertically toward incoming bombers. After reaching altitude and making 1 or 2 high-speed attack passes, the pilot would glide back to base. Of course, reality was rarely so tidy. The fuel mixture used in the rocket engine was dangerously reactive. If the 2 liquids touched each other outside the engine under the wrong conditions, they could ignite violently. Ground crews had to handle the fuels with extreme care, and accidents were unfortunately not uncommon. My neighbor Bob once read about those fuels and immediately declared that the aircraft was obviously designed by secret alien chemists. Bob believes aliens built half the technology of the 20th century, although strangely they never help him fix his leaking roof. Despite these challenges, pilots who flew the Komet often admired its performance. The aircraft accelerated like nothing else of its era. Climbing thousands of meters in mere minutes gave pilots a thrilling and sometimes terrifying sense of power. Compared with other interceptors of the Second World War, the Me-163 was astonishingly fast but operationally limited. Conventional fighters such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109 or Focke-Wulf Fw-190 could patrol, escort bombers, or dogfight enemy aircraft. The Komet, by contrast, was a specialized weapon with an extremely narrow mission profile. Its climb rate and top speed allowed it to reach Allied bomber formations quickly. However, the short engine burn time meant the pilot had only a brief window to attack. The aircraft's incred aiming its 30mm cannons, extremely difficult, often had only a few seconds to line up a shot before overshooting the target. As a result, despite its advanced technology, the Me-163 achieved only a small number of conflict degrees during operations. Allied bomber crews were certainly startled when a tiny rocket fighter suddenly appeared at enormous speed, but the Komet rarely had enough time to make multiple effective passes. In many ways, the aircraft resembled a technological preview of the future rather than a fully practical weapon of the time. Rocket propulsion and high-speed aerodynamics would later influence experimental aircraft and spaceflight research. But during World War II, the concept arrived slightly too early to change the outcome of the war. My friend Timmy once said if he had 8 minutes of rocket power, he would use the first 4 to climb, the next 3 to panic, and the last minute to look for the nearest tavern on the ground. Honestly, that might be the most realistic pilot briefing I've heard. Looking back today, the Messerschmitt Me-163 Komet remains one of the most fascinating aircraft ever built. It combined revolutionary aerodynamics with rocket propulsion at a time when most fighters still relied on piston engines and propellers. The aircraft's performance was breathtaking, its engineering daring, and its operational story a mixture of brilliance and risk. Although it did not significantly alter the course of the war, the Komet demonstrated that aviation technology was entering a new era. Speed records were shattered, and engineers proved that rocket-powered flight was not just theoretical but practical, if somewhat dangerous. Today, surviving examples of the Me-163 are displayed in museums around the world where visitors can see this remarkable aircraft up close. Standing next to one, it is hard not to imagine the courage required to climb inside such a machine and ignite a rocket engine behind your back. Before we wrap up, a quick word of appreciation to the supporters of this channel. You are the reason these stories continue to take flight. Without you, I would probably be explaining aircraft history to my neighbor Bob, who would interrupt every 5 minutes to ask if the engine was powered by alien technology. Because the Me-163 was a military interceptor produced during wartime. It was never sold on a civilian market in the traditional sense. Production costs were tied to military contracts rather than commercial pricing. Surviving aircraft today are preserved primarily in museums and national collections rather than private ownership. Even so, historians and collectors consider the Komet priceless as a technological artifact. Its historical value lies not in auction prices, but in its role as the world's first operational rocket-powered interceptor and one of the most daring aviation experiments ever flown. In the end, the Messerschmitt Me-1963 Komet remains a symbol of both ambition and experimentation. It was fast, dangerous, revolutionary, and unforgettable. A machine that pushed the boundaries of engineering, and sometimes the patience of the pilots brave enough to fly it. And if you ever find yourself building a rocket aircraft in your garage like my friend Timmy occasionally threatens to do, my advice is simple. Wear a helmet, read the manual twice, and maybe keep Bob away from the fuel tanks.